Hello everybody, this is Hopkins with Baltimore Heritage, and we're back with another of our 5-minute histories videos. And today we're going to talk about train gardens, holiday train gardens. And I'm here at Firehouse, Engine House number 45 that has a holiday train garden. But before we do that, I'd like to turn it over to some folks who have made our videos this year possible and who I think you haven't seen yet. All right, here we go, over to you.
Hi, this is Aaliyah.
And this is John's and our cat Walter.
Thank you for watching Baltimore Heritage's 5-minute history videos.
And happy holidays.
Hello everyone. Thank you for all of your support, for watching our videos, and wishing everyone a wonderful holiday season.
All right, thank you, Leah, and thank you, Johns, and thank you, Molly. If you're just now tuning in with us, let me explain a little bit. When the pandemic hit back in March, it crushed all of our in-person walking tours and bus tours and bike tours, and we turned to these videos, and my daughter, Leah, kindly agreed to become my film crew with her iPhone. My son, Johns, was the backup film crew when my daughter couldn't do it, and when my daughter relented to allowing him to use her iPhone. And then, of course, my colleague Molly, the other 50% of Baltimore Heritage's staff, whose research and efforts make these videos possible. All of the wonderful historic images that she digs up, I don't know where. She's become not just a video editor, but learned how to become an expert video producer. And I will have to say, if she ever takes a sick day, we are going to be in a world of hurt. So thank you very much, Molly. Oh, and thank you to our cat, Walter, who, if you've seen some of the earlier videos, when we were basically stuck inside and filming from my living room, our cat, little Walter, made some unannounced visits, cameos, that according to people's comments to us were apparently pretty popular. So little Walter says, happy holidays also. All right, let's get on to firehouses and train displays. I am here on Glen Avenue in front of the firehouse here. Which normally has a wonderful holiday train display. And I am not from Baltimore, and I didn't know what a holiday train display was until I got here. And in fact, it was when I was married that my wife, who is an avid reader of the Sunday weekend section, woke up one morning and told me that we were going to spend a Saturday in December, going to see model trains and firehouses. And I, as a newlywed, said, okay, but with more than a little skepticism. But boy, was my skepticism shattered upon entering the first holiday train display at a firehouse. It was phenomenal. These are not just little toy trains going in circles. There were mountains, and there were lakes, and there were ski slopes, and there were carnivals, and there were flying saucers, and there were Elvises playing music. It was really magical. And most of all, there were people of every age and every stripe with enormous smiles on their faces. So how did we come to have a tradition in Baltimore over 100 years of train displays at firehouses? I wish that we could claim it. We claim to be the city of the birthplace of American railroading. But I think the origins really go back to the Lehigh Valley in Pennsylvania, around the town of Bethlehem, interestingly enough. A group of German immigrants from Moravia, the Moravians, settled there in the 1700s, and they brought with them a German tradition of the Putz, which means holiday decoration, essentially. And the Moravians turned this Putz into creche scenes, the manger scenes, and they would put them outside. By the early 1800s, they were putting them underneath trees, both outside and inside. And pretty soon, in addition to the manger scene, some of the Moravians were carving little replicas of, say, their own farmhouse or their barn or a shop on Main Street. And so all of a sudden, we had little Christmas towns pop up next to the manger scenes. And kids, of course, then wanted in on the fun. And so they would put toys there as well. And so this sort of began this tradition of putting manger scenes under trees, at least in the United States, putting manger scenes under trees, and manger scenes that included not just the biblical references. Incidentally, if you want a fantastic weekend away, Bethlehem is a wonderful place to go. You can see the Putzen, that's plural, but especially the Putz at the old Moravia Church. You can go to the nation's oldest bookstore, the Moravia Bookstore, I think 1745. And they have turned turned their Bethlehem steel plant into a wonderful space for artists and performers. And in the holidays, it is enormous. It is turned into an enormous art market. It's wonderful. By the 1880s, the toy manufacturers in the United States had begun producing cast iron toys. And interestingly, some of the first of those toys, there were little animals and little carriages, but there were also little toy trains and little toy firehouses. And soon up in Bethlehem, little toy trains and little toy firehouses were included among those scenes underneath the trees. So now we've got sort of trains and firehouses and Christmas trees. How did we get to where we are? Well, in Baltimore, actually, let me step back one step. Lionel Trains in 1901 is really the first big electric train producer. There was another earlier company that did that in, I think, 1896, but Lionel in 1901 put an electric train in a window display in New York City, and that was fabulous. People came from all over to see that. They thought their marketing at first was that toy trains would be used in window displays, kind of not too dissimilar from what we have now. But by 1920, they figured out they could sell them to individuals. The trains were pretty big and pretty expensive, so not too many people could afford them. But by the 1950s, Lionel had figured out how to make them smaller and cheaper, so that by 1950, they were the #1 selling toy, especially for boys. And Lionel was the nation's largest toy manufacturer of any type. So now we've got the toy train craze. And how did it get into firehouses? Well, I think there was a little bit of holiday magic. Think back to our toy firehouses, our cast iron firehouses and trains under trees. That got translated. You got to work with me here a little bit, but that got translated in 1917 to a gentleman named Eugene Daly in Firehouse number 28 on Guilford Avenue. And he took his love of trains and, as a fireman, put them not in his house, but he made a display in the fire station. And that quickly took off. Fire stations across Baltimore started putting up train displays, and so much so it got out of hand. And the city fire department put the kibosh on it in 1939. They were worried that the firemen were spending more time on the train displays than they were preparing for fires. But you can only keep holiday train displays down for so long. And by the 1950s, up they popped again in firehouses across the city. And today there are in fact a dozen or more firehouses that have train displays. One thing I want to say, there's another Baltimore connection here. The train displays in firehouses and in places like the B&O Railroad Museum, the Fire Museum, other places, they almost all have one thing in common. They're crazy, hectic with all sorts of stuff, but they almost all have little mountains. The trains go over little mountains and through little tunnels, and that's got a Baltimore connection as well. Those little tunnels were made by a company called Lifelike Products, and it made them out of its facility in what's now Mill Number 1, the former mill along the Jones Falls. If you've ever driven up at night, you've probably seen the Mill Number 1 neon sign. That's where they made the little tunnels and shipped them out across the United States. And one day, the story goes, a worker came in and put his cup of coffee down, and for the rest of the day, couldn't find it. But at the end of the day, he lifted up one of those little hollow tunnels that were made of this relatively new product called styrofoam. And sure enough, his coffee was still warm. So pretty soon, all the workers put their coffees underneath the little tunnels and kept them warm all day. And then one worker figured out if you put a little bit of ice in the bottom, you turn the mountain upside down, you put a little ice in the bottom, it would keep your sandwich cold all day long. And out of that was born the styrofoam cooler. And in fact, today, if you go anywhere in the country and you buy one of those classic styrofoam coolers, turn it upside down, and the odds are on the bottom, it's going to have the words Life Foam. And that's what Lifelike Products is today. So those styrofoam coolers trace back to our train sets in the 1950s here in Baltimore. All right, I am going to conclude by saying a sincere thank you to everybody who has hung in there with these videos over the last 9 months during this pandemic, watched us as we learned and fumbled, encouraged us, sent us in comments and corrections. Say thank you to everybody who's donated, and thank you to everybody who's considering donating. And then I want to say finally a happy holidays to everybody. And no matter how you celebrate the holidays, I'm going to end by saying that I hope that it includes trains. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.